Fan, 25 years at Fox. Was that the record? Was that the number that came out?
Yeah. I guess that explains the gray hair. It's all starting to make sense for me now.
So 25 years, and is that the most years that any analyst has had at the network, period, or just NFL?
I think it's probably just NFL. So it's the way that I understand it. And this is all done by my crew. My crew is awesome. They're such great people, and I still don't know how they pulled this off without me not knowing anything about it, because we have so many emails that go back and forth during the course of the week that somebody didn't slip up. But yeah, it's the longest tenured by an NFL analyst at any network, wow. And it's number 2 in total of games at Fox.
I've always wanted to ask an analyst this. I know it's going to be a stupid question. When the replay comes up and you're already like pointing out what happened, are you getting that replay before the rest of us, or are you like seeing what happened live in the moment to be able to break it down? I've always asked that. Like I've always wondered that. Are you getting a replay beforehand to be able to say, now watch this guy here? Because I'm like, how did he see that all live when it originally happened?
Yeah, there's a few tricks of the trade. I don't know if I'm allowed to share them, but we don't get anything unique. From our camera angles, we get what we have at our disposal from the broadcast, and I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is there's a different number of cameras per crew. Because it's just so expensive to staff with equipment and personnel and everything. So, you might not get that definitive look, but that is based on the inventory that you have per group. Now, what we are able to do is, I can go back and forth, with the replay. So when it happens live, I can go back a little bit and kind of figure out exactly what happened. So, I might be trailing 3-4 seconds. But that's the hard part, is kind of getting to the point in the play where you get that definitive look, because a lot of times on the play-by-play angle, it's a little bit more broad, so you don't really get into the detail. But yeah, I'm usually chasing something about 3 or 4 seconds behind you.
Daryl Moose Johnston here on 105 Through the Fan. All right, so I'm thrilled that we have you on today, because I was trying to read through your Matt Eberflus lines and content during the game. Where do you think the Cowboys are with him in your talks and lead up to the Giant game? Were you getting a sense that the players wanted Eberflus to stay? Kind of reset for us where you think they are with the DC.
Yeah, I that was the biggest question. I got a chance to visit with Quinnen Williams, before the game. And, I asked Matt, too. I said, how many advocates do you have for you? Because we heard what Trayvon Diggs had talked about, where he wanted to play more man coverage, less zone. But there's a lot of reasons why, right? The reason they're playing a little bit more zone, maybe than even for a Matt Eberflus-style defense, is because the pass rush isn't getting home, and you've got injuries at the cornerback position. You've got injuries at the safety position. So the coverage is not holding up. And so, if we're not getting home, with the pressure playing man, then let's make sure that we're taking care of each other. We make them, what everybody talks about when they talk about shell coverage. We're going to make them drive the length of the field. We're not going to give up the explosive play in a one-on-one situation. So there's some issues there, but that was really kind of brought up by Trayvon, and that was my biggest thing is there other players on the defensive side that feel the same way as Trayvon did, whether that's on the back end and playing more zone coverage than they would prefer, or playing up front and not pressuring as much as they would like to. But what I got from my conversations with Matt and then validated by Quinnen were that no, the guys like the system. And that's my whole thing is you pull the plug on this and start from scratch. You're on your third defensive coordinator in 3 years, and nobody's had the opportunity, to take that next step in the system. And that's what I understood from my conversations last week is because everybody's been in and out of the lineup, the cornerbacks coming into training camp, the safeties shortly after that during the course of the season, the linebackers throughout the season. The back seven has never been able to play to the point where they can get that kind of nonverbal communication coordinated because they just understand because they played side by side with their teammates for a while. So in my opinion, I think you put some things in place. You got some benchmarks in place for Matt Eberflus. You give him an opportunity to work with the new personnel that's there, and you start to tweak that system. You upgrade the back end, during free agency of the draft, and you come out and you see what you do next year. But, to just scrap it and start from scratch again, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me.
Wow,
I know the stats are there. I know the numbers are I'm not even going to say great, right? Hey, the numbers aren't great. No, the numbers are bad. The numbers are bad, and I get that. But, is it really going to help to go all the way back to square one again?
Do you think you ever have to sell it to a fan base when you're making a decision like this?
Yes, I think you always do. You've got to come out and you've got to give your reasons why. I mean, everybody wants to be in the loop as much as you can allow them to be in the loop. There's certain things that you're not going to tell your fan base or, make public comments. A lot of the important decisions are made behind the scenes, and they're grown men, and everybody understands it. But there's a way to have that communication out that provides some reasons why to the fan base. This is the direction we're choosing to go, and here's why. You may agree with it, you may disagree with it, but this is what we're doing, and we're committed to it, and we've got buy-in from everybody. So I think that is the most important thing. I hope the Giants did that with Joe Shane, if he's going to be their GM, and it sounds like he is moving forward. Indianapolis, you got to come out and say why we're staying with our GM and our head coach. And I think that's a smart idea too, because I like both of those guys. That's an obvious situation why the Indianapolis Colts season, fell apart down the stretch. You lose a guy at the quarterback spot that's playing some of his best football with Daniel Jones, and you're not going to be as good. And Anthony Richardson is already out, the guy who's supposed to be your quarterback of the future. So if everybody just kind of takes a pause and steps back and looks at it and finds out, and I don't want to call them excuses, but here's the definitive reason why this season was such a struggle. If you can't find that, and it's just, hey, there's a disconnect, we're not connecting with our players, the scheme is not a great fit, if there's reasons that a change is going to be beneficial, then you make the change. But when there's reasons why, I think that you need to temper that decision, and you need to think long and hard on it. I think Arizona is going to regret the fact that they got rid of Jonathan Gannon this year, because all the players supported him. Every time we had him, they were working hard, even though they were having a really tough season. The amount of injuries they had this year at key positions, it was unbelievable. And why ownership doesn't take that into consideration when there's other positives. And then to your point, you got to come out and you got to sell that to your fan base, because that fan base is going to be upset. And you've got to sell it and tell them why we're doing this.
Are you on Twitter a lot? Because your mentions are going to be filled right now with I got to give you props for coming out with a rare opinion of keeping Eberflus around, but I hope you got nothing scheduled the rest of the day.
Yeah, I don't really care what people think about my decisions. I don't really spend a whole lot of time on Twitter. I think you drive yourself crazy if you do. We can have some callers call up, and they can jump on, and we can talk to them right here, right now, and we'll see how brave they are. So, but yeah, I just think the one time early in my career where it happened, and I got this from Troy as well because he had it happen to him. It's amazing what people say and what people hear, and the difference is stark. And I have gotten comments, within 5 minutes on Twitter when I would look at it, and what I said and what was heard by two different people from opposing fan bases was unbelievable. It was shocking to me. Yeah. So, people hear what they want to hear. And that's something I think that really happens on Twitter, where, they heard you say something and they're going to come out and they're going to take their stance. And a lot of times it's not exactly what was said, or, you can't do anything without having a conversation like we're having right now. Like you ask me the why. Why would you do that? Why would you hire somebody that it sounds like every single Dallas Cowboy fan wants to go in a different direction? And I'll tell you this, when I told Matt Eberflus, over the course of our conversation, I said, hey, we are not going to do a hit piece on you on Sunday. I really think that you should have an opportunity to come back. I'm not a big fan of scrapping things in year one when there's reasons why things didn't work out. And, so I hope you get that opportunity. And he said, oh, you must be the fifth person then here in the DFW area. So he understands exactly where he's at and the challenge that he has in front of him.
So, Moose, obviously, like when we're talking about continuity and not, full resets on the defensive side of the ball, let me float a compromise potentially that would then leave the fan base happy, but also still kind of hold some of those things. You've got Jonathan Gannon, who just freed up. It comes from the Zimmer coaching tree, uses a lot of similar language, practice, setup, different things like that. So guys carrying over from 2 years ago maybe feel like, all right, there's some similarities, I can get that rhythm. Or Jeff Ulbrich and his experience with Aaron White-Cotton, who's their defensive line coach. Like maybe you can still, is there a way you can cobble together something that looks like continuity, quote unquote, but also gives you a fresh face and a change?
Well, are you making that change at the top? Are you going right to the defensive coordinator position,
Yes.
or are you adding some pieces in there that are going to support Matt?
Yeah, it'd be changing the defensive coordinator, but trying to align it with, all right, maybe some Zimmer philosophy from a couple years ago, or maybe some of the stuff White-Cotton's already been doing on the defensive line and expand it a little.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, is Jonathan Gannon going to come in, or is he going to take a year off? There's some people that feel, that maybe Matt Eberflus needed to step away from the game for 1 year after what happened to him in Chicago and just kind of, get a big reset. But, a lot of times you want to get right back into the game and kind of, create some positive, situations where you're not thinking about all the negative things that happened to you while you were in Chicago. But for me, isn't that exactly what we tried to do when we brought Mike Zimmer in? We tried to make that connection back to players that were, still kind of familiar with what Mike Zimmer was doing. It's a decision. I don't think do the players have faith in the system that's in place? Yeah. And if they don't, if the consensus is they don't, then you need to think about making a change. If the players believe in what we're doing and feel like they haven't had the opportunity, I mean, look at Jadeveon Clowney and how much he's grown through the course of the season. Look at the impact that Quinnen Williams had, down the stretch. There were times in the second half of the season where the defense would start to show some signs, but it just wasn't consistent enough. And then down the stretch, but that to me is the complementary component, right? Just that second half of the previous games, it hasn't been what it looked like in the first half. So why is that happening? There are so many things, and that's my issue. There are so many reasons why the season happened the way it did, and we're looking at one that's very obvious when you look at statistics from the defensive side of the ball. And if you think that changing Matt Eberflus is going to cure everything, you're not correct. I mean, that's one move is not going to fix what happened to this team this season.
Moose, we have breaking news with you on the home of the Cowboys from Adam Schefter. The Dallas Cowboys have fired defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. They will now be going, this is to your point, Moose, they'll now be going on their fourth different defensive coordinator in 4 seasons.
Yeah, well, there you go. So now the people on Twitter don't have to call and say that I'm nuts. I've got it officially now. Hey, that wouldn't have been what I did. And now I always say this. We look at it from the outside. I don't know what goes on in the meetings. I don't know. If the guys are telling you something that they just don't want out there publicly, but they do feel that maybe they lost confidence in the system. So, but I'm surprised. I was surprised when Jonathan Gannon got fired because there were some rumblings out that maybe he was going to be retained. And now the big thing is we hear all this stuff about Brian Flores. That is a completely different system. That is a very unique. A Vance Joseph, a Brian Flores. That's going to take some unwinding and some additions to be brought in. So, people that now will start to hear, some people that want to do that. Where you've already seen Minnesota come out and. Kevin O'Connell has said, Brian Flores is not going anywhere. So they're going to retain him. Does Vance Joseph want another shot at a head coach opportunity? I don't know. Steve Spagnuolo, you look at what he did. He had an opportunity to be the head coach of the Rams. It didn't work out. Maybe he didn't like it. Maybe he's just more comfortable as a defensive coordinator. But you look at what Steve Spagnuolo has accomplished throughout his career and has the humility to stay as a defensive coordinator, but one of the best defensive coordinators, in the NFL. And what has he got? 5 Super Bowl rings now, I think. So I just, people that are chasing things and, everybody wants that next opportunity. But sometimes if you just sit back and look at what you have around you, the number one thing is winning championships, Super Bowl championships. That's what we're all driven by in the NFL. And if the best opportunity to accomplish that and be a part of a team that does something special is being the defensive coordinator or the offensive coordinator with a group that's established, then I'm always confused why people would walk away from a situation where they're sitting there poised to win multiple Super Bowls.
January 27th at the Ford Center at the Star in Frisco. You will be getting inducted into the East-West Shrine Bowl Hall of Fame. I know that was a big thing for you leading up to your draft process, and I know you're doing some advising with them now. Just talk about the honor and also what you're excited about for the game this year as somebody who's advising on it.
Yeah, I can't wait. It was really cool last year. We were out at the event last year out at AT&T, but obviously, I mean, AT&T is a huge stadium, and this is a college all-star game. I think it's going to be fantastic at the Ford Center at the Star. It's going to be a perfect size. It's going to be full. It's going to feel great for the guys on the field. The environment's going to be fantastic. It was such a huge part of my journey to the NFL. We had two good teams at Syracuse when I was playing, but we were still, from the Northeast, not a lot of coverage, not the respect that, even back then, the Big Ten had, the SEC had, all the power conferences. We were an independent school, on the East Coast. So to get into that environment and play against some of the best players in the country and compete against some of the best players in the country and answer some questions that maybe some of the scouts had about you as a player. That was my biggest thing. I mean, I remember talking to all the scouts that were there. They're like, one of the biggest things we have to see is, can you block a blitzing linebacker because you come from an option-based offense, that doesn't do a lot of drop-back pass. So that was a great thing for me. I knew exactly, what I had to do, to kind of get on everybody's radar. So, it's a tremendous opportunity. The way they tie it to Shriners Children and just what that organization does, we talk about it all the time. You take some time and you go to visit, one of the events where they've got some of the kids that are there, and you think you're having a tough day, and then you see what these kids are dealing with on a daily basis and how they smile and how excited they are. It's one of the more impressive organizations I've ever been a part of or had the opportunity to visit, and what they have done in tying it into the actual college all-star game is one of the cooler relationships that exists in football today. I mean, they had their huge celebration last year in their 100th year. This is going to be 101, so they're on to their second century. It's just awesome. It really is. It's amazing what they do.
Well said. Incredible timing this morning. Congratulations at Fox, and we hope to see you in San Francisco